Hi, my name is Paula. I'm here to tell my story about recovering from ME/CFS, Lyme disease and co-infections, POTS, severe endometriosis, latent infections, post-infectious IBS, Mast Cell Activation Syndrome, of which I experienced for 18 years. And I'm here to detail my recovery process, which took 6 years. Um, Having been bedbound and housebound for the better part of a decade, and now living life pretty much to its fullest again. And I just want to detail how Primal Trust helped me with that process. It really helped me work through my trauma and go beyond the illness side of things to develop my own main adult personality and transform my life so that I can live the life that I want to be living.
Welcome, everyone. Today I have with me Paula, another success who has healed from so many things. This is really special to me because Paula is one of the first people I met when I started coaching back in 2018. She'd reached out to me. She'd found me in the forum. I remember you were super sick. Some of the things that she's dealt with, and she'll tell us more, were ME/CFS. She had the Lyme and the co-infections, the Epstein-Barr, the mast cell. I know you had POTS. You had major issues with endometriosis. And here you are on the other side. You were sick for many, many years, I think almost 2 decades, if I'm right.
Yes.
And I know you've had a child and you're working and you're traveling and you're doing so many things. So welcome, Paula. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Thank you, Kathleen, and well, I'm excited to talk to you as well.
So Paula is one of those cases where I met her kind of earlier on in her journey, and then I lost track of her. And then next thing I know, she reaches out. She's like, "Hey, I'm ready for my success interview." And I'm like, "Oh, let's fill in the gaps here because I want to know what
Surprise!
happened." Surprise, I'm better. So, for those listening, I'd love for you to first of all share what your list of diagnoses was so that people listening can be like, "Oh, yeah, I have that. Can you really heal from that?" So, if you could list your diagnoses and then give us a bit of your story. How long ago you started getting symptomatic? And I know it was a long time. So, for those of you who
Sure.
have been, "Oh, I've been sick for too long," there's no way I can heal. I think Paula is going to challenge that belief. And
Mhm.
then we'll go into some more questions.
Sure. Okay, so official diagnoses were ME/CFS, of which I was severe. I ended up severe, so I was bedbound and housebound. That period of my life took the better much of a decade. So I was pretty much bed and housebound for the majority of my 20s. Also, other diagnoses were POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, Lyme disease, and two co-infections with that, Bartonella and Ehrlichia. I don't know if I've said that right. Those are there. IBS, post-infectious. I was dealing with latent infections like Epstein-Barr virus. I've had so many glandular fever reactivations. Heat intolerance came with all of that, low immune system function, and I would also say stage 4 endometriosis and adenomyosis. And I was telling Kathleen, I have actually had 2 surgeries for that. The second surgery I had went for 6 hours, and I had a bowel resection with that. And also mast cell activation syndrome, and pretty much just being allergic to everything at that time. So that's the gist. I'm sure there's more, but that's the gist.
And how long were you sick for?
I would say around about 18 years all up.
18 years.
The
Wow.
recovery process for me was a long one, which really is why I wanted to put my story out there, just to pay it forward and help other people that are just really in the trenches with it and it's taking a long time. They're not the 6 month recovery stories that they've seen. It took me about 6 years to get to where I am now. A lot of stops and starts and ups and downs.
Hmm. And you kept with it.
I did because
Yeah.
it's worth it.
Yeah.
Better that than lying in a bed or in a dark room dying and hopeless, basically. So for me, it started when I was a teenager, about 16 or 17 years old, and I contracted Epstein-Barr virus. I think you guys call it mono in the States. And I basically slept for an entire month after that. And from then on, going to school was patchy. I was continuing to deal with fatigue, brain fog, light and sound sensitivity, unrefreshing sleep, insomnia. I've dealt with a lot of that. Swollen glands, the flu-like symptoms. I think a lot of us are probably familiar with the breakdown of symptoms. And I really started noticing that my ability to recover from exercise was impaired. I felt like a toy that somebody had taken the batteries out of. I couldn't kick out. I couldn't go anymore. So I stopped playing sports, and I just was feeling really drained. But the doctors here are very dismissive, still not fully educated. There's some areas that have improved, but on the whole, the education and awareness isn't there. So it was sort of like, oh, it's puberty. Oh, you'll recover in time. Just rest, hydrate. Evidently, that wasn't enough, and that wasn't the thing that improved things. So fast forward to when I was 19 years old, I went to Thailand. This would have been not too long after the tsunami happened, and I was in the jungle with my then boyfriend, now husband, and we were doing all the touristy things as you do. So we were riding on elephants and whatever else, and I got bitten by a tick, and that pretty much just started the descent into hell, really. So from that trip, I noticed that I just started feeling ill while I was over there, and I just never really got better from there. I started developing severe digestive symptoms to the point where I didn't have a formed bowel movement for a decade after that trip. So people with extreme digestive systems and just diarrhea, aren't you glad you know this about me? It's very personal today. Yeah, so that was where I was at. I had to do fecal transplants because it was that bad. I was bleeding. And then that triggered off a lot of the being bedbound and housebound from there. I was trying to finish my degree. I changed degrees because at that point I didn't know what was wrong with me, but I knew I couldn't pursue a career that was physically active. So by the skin of my teeth, I got my degree. I was collapsing in exams by the ends of it. And I was very stuck in that push crash cycle because there's a mentality here of soldier on. And, I was young. So I was like, I was ignorant. Maybe if I just push past it, whatever's happening will eventually stop. It didn't. And then I eventually pushed too hard. And I had this really strange moment of feeling like I'd busted a fuse in my brain, like someone had stuck an electrified pitchfork into my nervous system. And then I was at the point of crawling on the floor to get to room. When I did attend doctor's appointments, often my dad and my husband had to hold me up. I'd hold onto the walls. I couldn't function. I stopped working. I lost a lot of relationships. I just didn't want to be here anymore because the suffering, not because I didn't want to live, I just wanted the suffering to stop because it was relentless. And there's no reprieve. I became allergic to everything. I had a period of about 2 years where all I could drink was chicken soup, like a broth. I think I weighed about 56 kilograms at that point. Yeah. And I think I was telling you before, I lost all muscle mass from that experience. So I found picking up a tissue or a pen extremely heavy. Wow. So yes, and so that's where I was. Any modicum of brain function I had, I spent it, scouring the depths of the internet, all dark corners, PubMed, just to try to work out what was wrong with me. they just put it down to an unknown parasite from Thailand and, um, you know, Epstein-Barr virus. But I knew it was more than that. I found some doctors that could help. Majority gaslighted me and were just completely unhelpful. And I did manage to get myself out of severe, more towards a moderate state before I found a really fantastic doctor here who very much advocated the top down and bottom up approach. So we did all the brain based work on top of, you know, Western medicine, Chinese medicine, all that good stuff.
Wow.
So that's pretty much the gist.
It's a lot. And I think it's also just so amazing. I'm looking at you and you look so vibrant. And when
Thank
people
you.
have been through that much to the point where they're literally only drinking chicken broth and they're allergic to
Mm,
everything and they can't move, it often seems like that is such a hopeless scenario. And for a lot of people who can't quite believe that there's a way out when even
mm,
experts can't help them, I think it's a really dark place to be. I'm
absolutely.
curious as to how you, I mean, obviously you were going down that route for a long time before you started neural retraining, because you just started that about 6 years ago, and your story is much longer. How did you get into that? And then let us know how the story progresses. And I also know that you worked with a really great integrative practitioner of some sort, along with neural retraining, which I think can be a real win-win when you find one that um, believes in this work and knows how to appropriately utilize both. So I'd love to hear more about that part of the story as well.
Yeah, sure. One thing I do want to add, just because I think it's important, is with the POTS diagnosis I was telling you earlier, I came very close to being defibrillated about 3 times. So my nervous system was extremely stressed out to the point where if somebody came to the front door of my house and rang the doorbell, I'd hit the roof and burst into tears. It was, yeah, just completely strung out. So um, I had heard about DNRS and I was skeptical at first just because I think it was in the early days and the way it was presented kind of came across of like, this is mental and you can think your way out of this, which we all know is not the case. And so I was about 2 years into that. I definitely made progress with that program. I met some great people as well. I tried ANS Rewire, Dan Newford's ANS Rewire program as well. And then via the forums, I heard about you, your story, and your program and what you were doing. And I thought, okay, we were similar on the scale of suffering. And I thought, okay, let me see what she did. And so I contacted you. I still very much had a fear of the infections and relapsing because my connection to myself was still broken. I would say, despite doing 2 years of the neuroplasticity program, I still didn't 100% trust my body enough for it to be a safe place for me to inhabit full time. And I just wasn't getting to those deeper layers that I knew I needed to get to. So I contacted you and you just said, okay, this is great, but Paula, do you realize you're gaslighting yourself? And that was a light bulb moment because I didn't realize at that point, like I said, there can be an element of toxic positivity, I think, sometimes with the brain retraining programs. And there's sometimes can be a sense of if you're not uplifting yourself enough, you're doing it wrong, or that you just need to keep uplifting and push through and everything will fall into place. And so I was describing this to you, and you said that to me, and I went, oh, I am doing that. And then you talked about all the other tools and techniques and gave me an understanding of how I actually needed to attune to myself so that I could get my nervous system back on board. And you really honed in on that while I had all of these infections, the biggest infection I probably had at this point was fear. And that was perpetuating the maladaptive stress response and controlling my physiology. So this was like, wow, this really hit home for me. I really wanted to have my first child at that point, and I knew I couldn't parent from the place that I was in. So I thought, okay, I'm going to give your level 2 recorded mentorship a go. And so that's what I did.
Wow. I think it's amazing that you were able to just be in the thick of it, be doing all this brain retraining, having this fear, and yet you were open to learning and seeing things differently. Like, what's another angle? And I think that
Yeah.
that's why you are where you're at right now. Sometimes we get so
Mm,
rigid on like, okay, this is the path, and I'm only going to do this, or I'm only going to do this brain retraining thing, and I'm not open to anything else, or I'm only going to do the conventional
mm,
doctor thing. And your willingness to evolve as a person, your willingness to evolve even your approach is why you were able to continue with this evolution. Um, and I'm glad you brought up the gaslighting thing because, I started coaching back in 2018, and you were one of them. And I remember that there was this culture of toxic positivity. Brain retraining was all the rage.
mm,
And while it was
mm,
great, I would talk to people and they were so out of their body and so out of reality and literally doing this brain retraining thing, like taking a type of Xanax pill, or around was like, oh my gosh, I'm actually
mm,
terrified of the symptom, so I'm going to go put
mm,
myself in la la land, but not actually land back in the body and develop that ability to become in both embodied as well as
yeah.
positive, and to meet the wounding as well as create a different
Mm,
future scenario. Both have to happen. And so thank you for putting that to words, because I think that's a really important point that you made a shift around that time. Okay, so
mm.
continue with your story. I want to hear more.
Yeah, and just to further what you were saying, I think staying, I think neuroplasticity, it's great. Don't get me wrong, it's great. It's a definite tool in the toolbox, but um, I think if you're not doing the deeper work, you taught me about the somatics, the polyvagal vagus nerve training, things like that. When you're just sometimes doing neuroplasticity, it can lead to avoidance a little bit, escapism, as you said, because you're not actually able to feel and process and resolve that within your body. And I think it can stall your progress because you need those other tools, in my opinion, just to increase the capacity in the nervous system and the flexibility. And I think sometimes the neuroplasticity tools miss the mark just a little bit
Mhm.
when you're just doing, your hour of rounds a day and maybe some laughter yoga.
Mhm.
I think that can keep you a little bit surface level.
Mhm.
I think it's when you get to a point where you are able to establish safety
Mhm.
and to actually really calm your nervous system down. And this is not something that's talked about enough. I had to spend about a year manually kind of overriding myself and purely focusing on getting calm.
Mhm.
That was it. I really needed to do that first. So, yeah, just the foundational stuff of that first. And then you find when you do all your brain training techniques, what I also found is some things that I couldn't tolerate, medications. I had a really hard time with antibiotics at the start. I found that I could tolerate them better once I was well into all the brain based work and trying to get back into my body, um, which was helpful.
Wow.
So, yeah, so I just ended up doing your program, continuing on with the protocols that my doctor gave me. That was, for me, that was antibiotics, detox protocols, Buna protocol. I did about 8 or 9 rounds of IVIG as well. And I just kept going. But something that you said to me as well is, just go be a human. Go be a human in the world. And I actually found that I needed to do more of that. Even simple things like if you're stuck at home, just looking out the window, or go sit outside in the sun if you can. Stare at the trees. Don't spend your entire day trying to fix yourself. Um, that was really helpful. And so I started trying to spend a lot of time doing that. I let go of the time frame because, it feels so important at the time. But honestly, once you get to the other side of it, you realize that's not what mattered. It's the consistency. And I just kept going. I stopped and started, but I could see, bits of my life were coming back, and I could start doing things that I wanted to do. And I could start to live again. So that was enough motivation for me to just keep going. I started small, but I worked my way up.
Yeah.
So yeah, there you go there. And then I obviously got to a point where I could have my first child. I found from week 3 of pregnancy, I stopped taking beta blockers for the POTS. So I will say pregnancy had a hugely positive impact on my health. I was fearful, obviously, to go through it because, can my body handle it after doing all of this stuff? And I did great. I had no complications. I didn't have any morning sickness. And I actually wonder if all of the tools that you taught me and techniques played a role in that.
Wow.
So I'm not sure if you've heard of that before, but yeah, that was a thing for me too.
Yeah. A lot of people ask me this. They're like, they want to have a child and they're in recovery and they ask, how do I know when I'm ready? Paula, how did you know you were in a process. When did you decide that it was right to bring a child, even though you were still on your journey? Tell me about that.
Yeah, sure. I didn't really know. I would say that age played a factor for me. I was 34. I was conscious of my history. But I had just had the second major surgery for endometriosis, and I knew within 4 months tends to be your best chance. I also felt like there was a child around me that wanted to be born. And I kept saying to my husband for about a year prior, I just feel like there's a kid here that wants to come. And that noise, so to speak, just got louder and louder. And I just looked at him and said, let's just take the leap of faith and do it. And we got pregnant the first try after that period, which was really surprising. So yeah, I was right. There was a child around me that wanted to come, and she was born the day before we went into lockdown in Sydney from the pandemic. So I want to also point out that we had no help in the first 4 to 6 months really of her life. And so I dealt with all of the sleep deprivation, and in the years that follow, the childhood sicknesses. What is hand, foot, and mouth, honestly? All of that stuff. And I didn't crash and I didn't relapse. So I think that's really pivotal and key there to talk about as well. Really how much getting that foundation of safety and calm and I've got this, and getting back into the driver's seat of your own body again. You don't have to live in so much fear. You can progress and you can maintain that. So that was really, really great. And I want to say, just as being a parent as well, everything you taught me as well, the program teaches Primal Trust, really helps you with emotionally regulating. So when you have a 3-year-old, that age is a blessing. And it's been great as a parent as well. And as a person who grew up with the parenting styles of, the 80s and 90s, just to be able to pass that on to my daughter and help her through those moments, that, it benefits you more than just beyond the illness side of things. I think it benefits you in all aspects of your life.
I love that. What, during this time, what were the tools that you were using? Like what kinds of things were you doing as you were, actually, 2 questions. When things were at the worst and you had your biggest shift, what do you think caused the biggest shift? What kind of tools, what did you do? And then when you had your child as well.
Okay. I will say increasing my immune function so that my body could start getting on top of the infections. I mean, I was undiagnosed with Lyme and Co for about 13 years. So it went systemic. And for me, as I said, I'd done IVIG, intravenous immunoglobulins, for anyone that's unfamiliar. I really needed immune support just to give me a bit of a breather. And then while I was doing all of that, when I started Primal Trust, we did the Tibetan 5 rites where you increase the pumping mechanisms. And I have to say, I found that extremely uncomfortable at the start. So it was the beginning of almost like your body is encased in concrete and everything is rigid. And it was the beginning of opening that up again and just starting to get the filtration processes happening again. That was really useful for me. I did a lot of yoga nidra. I liked your daily emotional elevation practices, your program break things out in, body and the mind-based stuff. And even just some of the things that you taught me, phrases like, I am here now in this, that was a really good one for me. But something that I think all the programs really missed that I needed, especially when you have broken trust with your own body, you don't trust your body and you are scared by your own body and what it can do, is that values deepening process and establishing your adult main adult personality. That I think was really pivotal, and it really provided a great focus of shifting away from trying to fix yourself to, okay, so what if I do this thing and I do recover? Who do I want to be? What does that look like? And I think that can help you when you're dealing with a lot of resistance as well. And you're kind of like, oh God, another practice day after day of this. But it gives you something to look forward and something to keep motivating you. So I would say those things were great. The clarity that provided was really important. It wasn't just, oh, I have all these sicknesses and I'm sick and I can't do X, Y, and Z. It was like, okay, but put that aside for a second. What do I want? And for me, having a child was up there because, I lost all of the experiences that people typically have in their 20s. While all my friends were traveling in Europe, I was like, do I attempt to get out of bed today to brush my hair, or do I try that in a week's time? So it was nice to focus on something else. And it shifted me away from making the illness as my personality, if that makes sense. I stopped trying to convince people that I was sick. And I instead started to become willing to face the limbic system resistance. I had a lot of that, so that I could really get to the point of fostering that deep knowing that there's nothing to fix. Like, you've been doing years of antibiotics, okay, you've hit it. And the detox protocols and disulfiram and all the other stuff that I tried, like, you've hit it. Now you need to address, the nervous system, and deeper than that, your spiritual self as well, I think. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I love that you've shared that this is really a multifactorial process. People want the tool that will fix them. If you guys are listening, you notice she didn't say, oh, it was this tool. And I rarely see that with these complicated cases. It is often where we start a tool to calm ourselves down, brain retraining or vagus nerve toning or something, just to take the edge off. And then maybe you're doing treatments that kind of help also support the body at the same time. But then there's a journey, like, not only do we need energy to like fight infections and detox, but we also need the energy to flow through our body. And that's where the somatic works and the pumping mechanisms that we teach in Primal Trust, that I found for me were huge, because like I could increase my energy with the brain retraining practice, but it would almost like blow my circuits because energy couldn't flow through my body properly. And then it would seem like, oh, this isn't helping. No, it's just that my body has forgotten how to flow energy. But most importantly, these tools, yes, they're helping you with energy. They're helping you calm down. They're helping you with flow. And then it's like, well, what is the purpose of healing and who would I be? And
Mm.
I swear, if people are so stuck in that illness identity, they will just keep going in circles because
Mm.
there's no trajectory for them to come back into life towards. And when I told you that advice, just go be a human, and it might look simple, like it might be just enjoying the trees or whatever. Um, that
Mm.
is where it starts. And I think a lot of people can get really stuck in a victim mentality when they're like, you don't understand. I'm too sick to
Absolutely.
live my values. I'm too sick to go outside. So, Paula, you were that person who was too sick to live. So tell us again
Mm.
so clearly, somebody who's just like you, how is it possible to live your values and to be a human and to not be in sickness identity with your symptoms? What was that like for you, if you could go into that a little more?
Yeah, sure. I would say something that was really key was accepting, swallowing the bitter pill of no one is coming to save you. There are people, and I've seen it. I've attended a Joe Dispenza advanced retreat. I know you've done that as well. I've seen some of the mystical healings, but I would say that my own experience and from what I've seen on a larger scale is you have to do the work. You have to adult yourself. And that can be really, really hard. That can be really hard. But the person that's going to get you out of this is you. And nothing changes that. And I think the great thing about that is once you come out the other side and you really live life, you find so much joy in even just the mundane things that you thought were mundane and you took for granted before, because we're not meant to just suffer the whole time. All the people that are bedbound now, you're really suffering. That isn't the life that you're supposed to live. We're meant to commune with others. We're meant to have joy. We're meant to have relationships. We're meant to be in nature. Um, that's what really fulfills us. Um, and, we were talking about some of the practices too, you said before. I want to say as well the eye based exercises, the eye tracking exercises, they were incredibly helpful. And I found once I started doing all of that and the breath work, I was able to start putting healthy boundaries in place with people in my life because I had a lot of difficulty with personal relationships at that time. The high functioning people in my life, they couldn't understand. And I probably wasted too much time being hurt and upset about that. And directing my energy there and not focusing it on myself and championing myself and continuing to keep going because their life story is their own. You know what I mean? And that stops you as well from being able to really practice gratitude. And I think I underestimated the power of embedded memory structures, how they activate the stress response in your brain. So I looped a lot. There was a lot of looping. And I think by doing the inner work with your program as well, I realized, okay, you're focusing on some of the wrong things here. You need to put that aside and, make it about you. Um, yeah, get your amygdala working so you can create new associations of things you actually want. So, yeah, I think that also really helped me start resolving the traumatic memories, which then led me to emotionally being able to move forward and yeah, just being more accountable and showing up more consistently. These things, yeah,
I
really
hear a
helped.
theme of you really recognizing that it's about you showing up for you, you finding that it's safe to be in your
Mm,
body, you discovering what you want. I like how you use the word you championing
yeah.
yourself. When I do these interviews, that is the number one theme that I hear is that people choose themselves and they choose to embody themselves and discover themselves and love on themselves um, and it's so interesting that I do believe that the immune system is only acting out our own relationship with ourself and with the world. It's a mirror. And when our relationship
Mm,
with self is either non-existent, dissociative, self-hate, all the things, our immune system is also very confused. And I really believe that the root of chronic infection is immune confusion. Um, and as we get a solid relationship with ourselves, and sometimes these tools, it seems like we're just doing brain retraining or somatic movement or whatever, but we're actually developing a relationship with ourselves. The immune system starts to mirror that relationship where we're letting people off the hook, so we're not getting overreactive to everything, where we are
Yeah.
finding ourselves in loving ourselves. So the immune system is like, oh, I want to protect this vessel, and it just gets intelligent. Um, and so I just think it's no coincidence that in this interview you've also mentioned that same theme, despite, yes, you did therapies to help support the body when it was too weak at the time to, clear out all the infections. You had appropriate support. And I think that integrative medicine and nervous system work and all of that can work beautifully when you keep it in the proper perspective, because like you said, there's no antibiotic in the world that's going to cause your whole body to come into balance. It might kill infection, but your immune system can still be completely dysregulated, and the brain and all of those things, until we address that. So this being said, I always am so curious that what people think was the setup for you to get sick in the first place. What was the true setup? Could you explain that, instead of people blaming the mold or
Yeah.
the Lyme or the tick bite or whatever? What do you believe was the
Yeah.
setup for you?
Um, and that's a great question, because once I really started able to heal my brain, I went further back beyond contracting the Epstein-Barr virus, and I didn't realize how much childhood trauma there was there, and generational trauma very much within my family. And no criticism of my family at all, but on my mother's side, they're immigrants. And they faced a lot, leaving a war-torn country, that type of thing, before they came here. And I noticed I grew up in an environment with a lot of fear for things that you don't need to have such a pronounced response to, but it was always like, watch out, be careful. It was always this. And so as time went on, I I noticed as my brain was healing, memories would start coming back. And, there's that saying, the body keeps the score. And things started bubbling up, and I thought, oh, okay, this is also why you were stuck for so long, because this was sitting here and it was unresolved. But yeah, I would just say a lot of various aspects of childhood trauma, um, that foundation was already there. So I think maybe contracting the Epstein-Barr virus was just the tipping point. There was already a lot of underlying
Well, I'm
stress.
glad that you can see that, and I hope that people are listening, that they take a good look at what could have been the setup, because what happens is, if you don't really look at how you reacted to the world, or how you were hypervigilant or type A or go-getter or full of shame or whatever, and instead you're focusing on the infection or the mold exposure or the thing, it can put you on this wild goose chase for years before you come full circle and realize that, okay, I've been doing the detox, I'm doing all these things, and I still feel sick. And it's because that original setup has not been addressed yet. And it was one of the things that I saw even in the brain retraining world. Like, yes, we're addressing the limbic system, but there's this whole underlayer of what drove the limbic system to become hypervigilant. It was just responding to an even deeper layer of how you learn to interact with the world to be safe, that unfortunately had some side effects of eventually collapsing the way that the nervous system and the immune system are coordinated and keep you healthy. And so I appreciate that you were able to see that. And the second question I have for you is that when people have this setup of trauma, I also think that it's hard for them to be willing to see themselves well and stable and free, and not needing to tell their sickness story, not needing that validation, and making that quantum leap to literally be somebody who isn't full of trauma, who is free. Tell me about your ability to reinvent yourself, because that's what you had to do, to choose out of this
Mm.
when maybe you had childhood stuff that went unacknowledged, unvalidated, and may have still been there. Because this, you guys, this right here, this leap, when you haven't been like validated for what you went through as a child, is one of the biggest leaps out of victim
Mm.
consciousness and out of illness identity that has to be taken to heal. So tell me how you took that leap, because you're full of light, you're living your best life. There's no way you would have gotten here without that leap happening.
Yeah, sure. I think the realization that the longest relationship you ever have in your life is the one with yourself. Um, and so I was able to get perspective, which really helped. Um, and I could see how the things that perpetuated the childhood traumas, when I looked at the people involved in those situations, I was able to look at, okay, but they had the exact same things happen to them as kids. They weren't shown any different, they didn't know any better. And often as parents, we do what we've seen, even if it's not always the best way. And so that was really great. And it's helped some of my familial relationships, because I've been able to talk about this stuff. And I've had family members say, wow, yeah, if I look back now, my parents and my grandparents, how they were, what our home environment was like, I can see now why I have all of these chronic illnesses myself as well. And so I think it was not blaming as well, getting past that point and understanding that we're all flawed. And, I had a key person in my life say, if I had have known this stuff, I would have done things differently with you. And I think just that acknowledgement was like, okay, let it go, let it go. It wasn't personal. It came from a place of just ignorance, not having that information and understanding. And then, as I said to you, the longest relationship you have is with yourself. Do you want it to be a good one? Do you want to spend it upset and this person did this to me and that person wronged me? Or do you want to go, okay, that happened. I can see why. I have compassion and empathy for that person now and their story and how that impacted my story. But from here on out, I control my story. And so that was a big thing, a lot of forgiveness, I think, and a lot of reparenting myself in some ways. And I don't want that to sound critical, because my parents, they're great and they really helped support me, as did my husband throughout the worst of it. But I think they would say, hey, I'm sorry, we didn't know this stuff back then and it was a different time. And so, yeah, I was able to reparent myself, and I started noticing sometimes when I was symptomatic, I stopped looking to other people to make me feel better. And I stopped talking about it and just thought, okay, yep, I see you. I feel this, but we're going to be with this. We're not going to avoid it. We're not going to distract and run away. And it took a lot of time to get comfortable with being really uncomfortable and sitting in it all. But then I started finding it started being able to flow through me. And there was a voice in my head saying, you've got this. I've got this. I can be in control again. I am okay. I am okay. And over time, the connection between brain and body started repairing, and I felt like I started getting that trust back on board, and we were working as a team again.
Wow.
So that was
I
great.
would love for you to share a tangible thing here. So what I'd like for you to share is a day in the life of Paula when you were at your worst, but when you were truly making a big difference, as far as what a day would. So for people listening, they're going to be like, what do I do? I'd like for you to just give us like an image of what the ideal day was when you were at your worst, of the things that you did that made a big difference. And then again, kind of now what you do to keep yourself on this trajectory. So yeah, it's just for people listening and they're like, I didn't even know what this would look like. What does it look like?
Okay, so The day at my worst, I would say I disconnected from any of the platforms, forums, anything where people said, I've been sick 45 years and you can't recover, and all of that. I completely disassociated from all of that. At that point, I'd made a commitment to just give things a try. And so, something I wish we'd see more of is stepping stone recovery stories as well, where somebody is 5% and they've gotten to 20%, because that leap is huge. It can be really unrelatable when you're bedbound to watch somebody that's 100% functional again, because you might not even be able to lift your head up off the bed for more than 2 minutes at a time. So I would say in the bedbound days, um, I was so miserable that it just felt better to focus on something happy and something positive. I live in Australia, so for me, that was about the fresh air, sunlight, starting small with the little challenges that you do for yourself. So maybe it was just standing up for a bit, getting out of bed for a bit. Even if I needed assistance, going and sitting outside in the backyard, uplifting myself, but keeping the visualizations of that more realistic. Not me visualizing that I was going out to run a marathon, because actually I found that could flare my system up, because my body was, oh, don't do that, that you can't do that. And I thought, okay, so I just started small. I started visualizing the life that I wanted, entertaining the thought about having a child, um, entertaining the thought about moving out with my husband again into our own place, and mothering myself a bit. I would do this physical technique where like you're patting a cat or a dog, and how they're purring and they're all like cozy and cuddly with you. I would do that, and the cat or the dog was my nervous system. And so I would just keep bringing myself back to calm and just building upon that little voice in my brain of, I'm okay, you've got this, you can keep going. I would try to focus on any little wins that I had, because they are there in the day. Maybe I could brush my teeth that day. Maybe I did some yoga from my bed that day. Maybe I had a nice memory pop into my head, because when things were very severe, I found I couldn't access dose chemistry at all. I couldn't access it at all. I had to actually watch YouTube videos of people laughing and smiling and feeling joy and feeling excitement. And I just made the facial expression because I was apathetic. There was nothing there. I was drained. And so I just laid there in my dark room like a little weirdo, watching these people and making this. I kind of faked it till I made it a bit at the start. And yeah, I would say that was sort of the beginnings, what the beginnings looked like for me. I'd stop when I needed to. I'd keep going again when I could, and just started listening to myself more.
Motivation to think greater than you felt and to do greater than you felt like doing, and clearly
Yes.
decided to believe that doing these things could help you heal, and followed through, showed up for yourself, even when it was as simple as like I'm just standing up and, oh, I'm supposed to celebrate this when, yeah, somebody else just got their life back. And you're right, there's a lot of stories of all of the,
Yeah.
oh, I recovered in 4 months or 6 months and I did this thing, and it can be so disheartening. But you are such a good example that sometimes slow and steady also wins the race. And maybe even, as you said, like you had a child without relapses. I'll be honest, I see some people have these quick recoveries, but it's not as deep, and then things happen and they kind of do this for years. That can happen, whereas yours may have been very slow, but it's much more predictable because of the length of time. And one isn't better than another. And I look forward to seeing what life is like for you in another 5 years, because of the way that you've trained your system to slowly come back. So yeah, so now what about now?
Yeah.
What's a life like now to keep you on this trajectory that you're on? Oh, and how do you feel now? Like what's your life like? What's
Yeah.
your function like? Things like that.
Yeah, sure. I feel really good now. Um, I don't think about it anymore. So, and that still blows my mind because it
Mhm.
consumed every waking thought. Sickness and everything about it was every waking thought. And it blows my mind that you can suffer on that level, but as you recover, you actually forget. Almost as they say, how you forget about the pains of childbirth, you actually forget. And life now is great. I can be a mother in all all senses of the word. You know, I've got a 3-year-old, so that's like making endless snacks and imaginative play. I can access that part of my brain now to do imaginative play. I can play with her at the park. We go to things and I can meet all of her needs while we're out. We've traveled. I've traveled internationally, domestically. I remember having really prominent vertigo, and I got on a cruise. I went on a cruise at the start of last year. That was great, no issues. I can
Wow.
exercise, which is a huge, huge one for me. Yeah, that's phenomenal. I never thought that would be able to come back.
Hmm.
Also, I couldn't sweat at the
Hmm.
worst of it. I can
I know.
sweat. You'd be surprised the things that
Yeah, like
you
that you have to wear
really
deodorant again
appreciate
because
being
you
able to
actually
do. I can
smell. Yeah.
sweat. Yes. Yes. I'll be exercising and
Hmm.
stripping off because I'm like, oh, I'm so hot now. I can lift weights again. Something I said to myself back in the days of finding lifting a tissue heavy was if I get out of this, I never want to be this weak again. So, weightlifting for me recently has become a thing, and I can progressively overload. So, I think I started at like 1 kilo, 1.5 kilo, and now with the lower body, I'm up to about 30 kilograms of weight, and I can push to near failure, you know, and not be lying dead in a bed for days to weeks, you know, to months afterwards, which is amazing. So that's great. I can work, I'm working, so I have the brain function to do that
Hmm.
and be on a computer. I can read books, I can go grocery shopping, I can eat absolutely everything.
Hmm.
There is no label checking anymore. I don't have any food
Wow.
intolerances or allergies anymore. Considering I lived off chicken soup for 2 years, that's amazing. If I want to
Wow.
wear fragrance, I can. I can wear makeup. I can just do all of the normal human things. I can do all of the brain work, planning things, attending loud family functions, going to
Hmm.
concerts and events.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm
That's
doing
amazing.
really, really well, which
I
is
love it.
great.
I love seeing these stories. It just shows what's possible, and it's also like showing the realism. Like it wasn't just brain
Mm,
retraining. You did both level 1 and level 2 of Primal Trust, which is
mm,
why I always encourage people like please do our
mhm,
level 2 program, which is where we're working on the deeper emotional wounding, developing that adult main personality, finding out who you really are.
mm,
Sometimes people will do these tools and they're like, oh, it's
mm,
a little better, but I still have all this stuff. I need to go find some other protocol, or whatever. And like, no, you're just picking up that toolkit. So thank you for explaining how important this journey is in its multifactorial approach, and that it's beyond just retraining your brain. It's changing the identity, and what it
mm,
leads to were all these things that you just described. I mean, a lot of people who are like you have exercise intolerance for years, if not ever. Like sometimes they get better, but they can't exercise.
mm,
So just knowing that you've gotten to that place is a sign that you have went to the depths of your nervous system with this work, not just the superficial aspect, but the
mm,
depths. And there is a difference, you guys. um, to be able to root out some of the weeds of what would cause you to crash. I mean, having a baby and being able to continue your healing says again that you went into the
mm.
depths. So I'm super, super proud of you, and it's such an amazing experience for
Thank
me
you.
to remember the woman I talked to the first time in like 2018, 2019, and
Mm,
to remember what you looked like also compared to now. you can just tell your
Mm.
mitochondria is full of life force energy, and that your energy is flowing through your body. And I'm sure this is going to be such an inspiration for so many people. So I like to end these by having you give your word of wisdom. If you could have talked to you, 10 years ago, or people who are just like you, and you were to coach them and give them some wisdom, what would that be?
I think one of the first things I would say is we all have unconscious biases, and I think in this journey, you very much need to be open. As I said, some of the things you told me about at the start, I was like, come on, how is that
Yeah.
going to heal me? Eye exercises? Like, what do you mean? But everything you do it is science based. It makes sense. It's evidence based. So trust the process. Just put the skepticism aside for the moment and just trust the process and just give it a try. You don't need to be perfect. I had plenty of days where I couldn't do anything and I just needed to stop. But I came back to it. Just come back to it. Do 5 minutes one day, an hour the next, whatever you can manage to do. Um, and I would just say that, yeah, you just don't need to be perfect. Really focus on carving out the life that you want to create, the vision for yourself and your life. Um, Completely put aside the thought that you can't heal, because there's enough stories now, here on your YouTube channel and your platform and others, for people who have been severely ill and have done it and are where I am today. I don't have anything in my body that you don't have. So I'm a normal person. If I can do it, you can do it. Um, Grieve, do your grieving. Do your grieving, but try to be your own best friend and, really get down to those deeper layers, that peeling back of the onion. We hear that phrase a lot. That's great at describing what you need to do. You just need to take it incrementally and bit by bit, keep going deeper. Don't underestimate how much the traumas and things you've experienced to do with the illness, but also prior to, impacting where you are now. So maybe be open to getting curious, and exploring that. And I think just really know that you can heal. It is possible. There's enough evidence of that now. Keep showing your brain the evidence each and every time. Show your brain the evidence, because that's the truth. If I can do it as just an everyday person, so can you, even with minimal resources. So it's possible. It's really, really possible. And yeah, advocate for yourself would be another thing I would say as well. Advocate for yourself. Even if nobody in your life believes in you, know that you can do it and keep showing up for yourself. Um, yeah, I would say those are the
Wow.
those are the
I
big
love it.
things.
This is so great, and you're right. There is so much evidence, which is why we do these interviews. Because, I mean, I remember 10 years ago when I was sick, there wasn't
Hmm.
a lot of these interviews to be found, and we were just like, well, hopefully this will work for things like Lyme and real infections, like when it's not just an
Hmm.
anxiety disorder. And yeah,
Hmm.
the evidence is there, you guys. And, watch this and rewatch this and just retrain your brain on what is possible, so that if someone like Paula can do this, who was as sick as she was for as long as she was, there's a good chance that you can as well. But it does take a willingness. There's a willingness, and especially a willingness to love yourself and let go, that you've absolutely demonstrated in this interview.
Hmm.
So, what's next for you in life with all of your newfound freedom?
I was thinking that about that actually. At the moment, I think I just want to build upon where I am and do more of what I'm doing now, because I can do so much. I want to just experience things more fully, um, keep moving towards where I see myself going. So I have fitness goals that I want to achieve now. I have fitness goals. That's amazing. And I want to do a bit more of paying it forward. So that's really important to me in this space and community. I stepped away for a while because I just knew what I needed to do. And I found the energy really heavy to be sort of surrounded by illness all the time when you are trying to transform and recover. So I'm at the point where I feel like I can come back and share my story and, be okay with that. But yeah, just more of what I'm doing now, more mum life, more family things, um, increasing and just being open to opportunities. And I do just want to say that to people to remember that all of these stories are roadmaps. They are your roadmap out. So even cherry pick, take what works, what resonates, and apply that to yourself and do it consistently. Um, that was something that also helped me as well. But yeah,
Back
just
to
more
that
living,
advice.
really, more being a human.
Paula, just go be a human. I said that to her once.
Yep.
Like, what? I'm like, go be
So
a human.
simple, but so
Well,
profound.
thank you. Thank you so much. I am
Yeah.
overjoyed to see you on the other side.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing your wisdom with everybody. I know it's going to be so helpful.
Thank you.